off with what, before we go to the politics, what is going on elsewhere. Of course, the doctor strike is on its 47th day today. 46th day today. Yeah. Of course, day 3 of talks, renewed talks, fresh talks with the government. Hopefully there will be something happening. But even as that continues, university lecturers have now starting their strike today. And still on the inside pages, we see clinical officers are going on strike as well. Bwana Kimani Wamatangi, surely, where are we headed?
Looks like people are getting this feeling that striking is paying off. And looks like it's the way they want to go. I want to say this, that I think all of us owe our civic duty of service to the people of this country, to ourselves. I mean, in the spirit of patriotism and building our nation. Before we think about our individual interests, we must say this very clearly, because I would want to ask myself, well, really, and get an answer to this. Why is it that there are only groups or sections of the workforce in this country that repeatedly always threatens and goes on strike?
Yeah, probably.
I mean, if you look at the university lecturers, if you look at least I hope the teachers were now solved, but you'll see like the lecturers really, you know, all the time, you know, perennially. Probably
never been able to handle the situation once and for all.
There has to be. I hope there are no other reasons. And I said here in our panel last week, the devil in all these things all the time is usually politics. And once politicians find their way to influence those sections of workforce, so that maybe they could either paint the government in bad light, or make create a certain narrative from perception that things are really not working in government, because that happens a lot of time.
Do you agree with that?
Definitely, sometimes it does happen. Yeah.
I think the Jubilee side of this country is completely lost. If the reason for the doctors' strike is politics, Jubilee has more politicians in this country than the CORD, at least in the National Assembly and in the Senate. Why can't those MPs then counter our politics so that the doctors can go back, if the reason is politics? The reason is that Jubilee is unable to meet the terms and conditions that were put in the CBA that was signed by both the doctors and the government. Could they please honor that CBA? Now, it's as simple as that.
Yes. Now, this story is on the front page of the Daily Nation. It cannot be ignored. Lecturers and non-teaching staff in public universities yesterday said they would go on strike today, even as the High Court extended order stopping the boycott. Now, this it will include KUSU, that's the Kenya University Staff Union, WASU, Kenya Union of Domestic Hotels, Educational Institutions, Hospitals, and Allied Workers. Now, the story goes on page 8 of the Daily Nation. Now, we've seen how the doctor strike has been treated. Now comes the university lecturers.
You know, I want to say more specific something about the doctor strike, because I've taken a keen interest with my colleague Senator Mutula Kilonzo Jr. I think late towards last week, we realized that there was little intervention happening. Courts were trying to commit striking union officials to civil jail, or to jail for contempt. We thought they were missing out on the whole point, that these things does not take away the issues. Then we saw Justice Wasilwa, a judge of concurrent jurisdiction, literally override a judgment of another justice, Monica Mbaru, who had given directions as to how the CBA, what are the steps towards the implementation of the CBA. The CBA is not a political document in this regard. The return to work formula of 12th December 2011 was negotiated by the then Deputy Prime Minister of the Republic of Kenya and Minister for Finance, His Excellency Uhuru Kenyatta. So Uhuru is well conversant of these issues. And in that return to work, there were two elements of it. They agreed to do this report, which was the famously Musimi report, or the Musimi Commission. And in addition to it, they also had a parallel CBA that was negotiated and agreed upon by both the national government at that time and the doctors' union. So it has been about now chasing the wind in terms of its implementation. And I think the most decisive judgment was the judgment of 6th of October last year by Justice Monica Mbaru, to give practical roadmap as to how to effect the CBA by saying that it was a legitimate document. It was argued and achieved at in a legitimate manner, and it is constitutional. Therefore, not the SRC, not the Council of Governors can override the contents of the CBA. Then when you hear Justice Wasilwa of a concurrent jurisdiction trying to pour water on the CBA by saying that it was not registered, you wonder how a judge of one concurrent jurisdiction will override another judge of another concurrent jurisdiction. So I think what has happened in this, there's been a lot of theatre. And I think, Wamatangi, from here, in fact, Senator Mutula Kilonzo and I have started. We are the people charged with devolution. We must move the next step to try and see that there's an honest conversation around these issues in terms of negotiations. So we wanted to have a stakeholder forum today. And we in fact engaged the various stakeholders, including some independent.
So you wanted to, am I going to?
What happened is when we met the CS on Tuesday, he indicated that he was himself convening direct negotiations starting that Tuesday. I think, but it bore pressure on the basis of what we had actually said over the weekend. So he decided that he was going to have direct negotiations on the CBA, because the contentious issue is the CBA. It's not about return to work or anything else. No, so they started on Tuesday afternoon at the Mayfair Hotel. We are waiting for the outcome. So what we were saying is that there was no point for a parallel process. In fact, yesterday I was briefing Hassan Mugambi, who was the journalist on Sunday. He was asking me where's the venue. I said you cannot have two concurrent processes of the same stakeholders when they're already committed to another process for the time being. So we'll await the outcome. But I'm here with Dr. Halwale. I'm here with my brother Senator Wamatangi. I'm here with our youngest Kitinda Mimba Senator Aaron Cheruiyot. In fact, a very good spread of interests. We should join up also with Senator Mutula Kilonzo. We have Senator Wako on board on this matter, and a few other senators. Let's pursue a settlement on this matter. If you negotiate around the facts, they are stubborn and they're overwhelming. So let us move from here and forget this politics issue. About the teachers, the lecturer strikes, that's another issue altogether. I would advise. We'll have to now look at the facts within that document or within that process. But on this matter of the doctors, we are abdicating a very principal responsibility as the principal defenders of devolution.
Now, of course, the talks towards ending or unlocking that stalemate continue, as Senator Hassan Omar put it. The CS for Health, Cleopa Mailu, is meeting doctors' officials. I think even today, hopefully there will be some light at the end of that tunnel. But coming to Senator Aaron Cheruiyot, now, what does he say about the Jubilee administration? Doctor strike has extended for over a month and a half. Now the university lecturers are going on strike. On page 2 of the Daily Nation, clinical officers to strike. About 5,000 clinical officers countrywide are to go on strike from Sunday over what they term as discrimination. Now, what does it say about the Jubilee administration when you have very important sections of the workforce totally disgruntled?
I think it all boils down to how we manage our resources as a country. I hope you do remember with me that about 2 or 3 years ago, the president presented to the country very hard and stubborn figures before us, that we were collecting about 70% of the revenue that we collect as a country. They all end up into paying civil servants. And I think you will be scoring cheap political points if you try to boil down this doctors issue, university lecturers, into a Jubilee problem. Most of these CBAs were negotiated even before the establishment of this administration. And I think to the contrary, this administration deserves commendation for having put its foot down and said, look here, as a country, this is not sustainable what you are doing. That every time people go on strike, we just come and write down some figures, we say 300%, 200%.
Are you seeing it the same way as Senator Matangi sees it, that it's a political problem, that it's an election?
Not necessarily. It's about leadership. Somebody has got to put down their foot and say, hey gentlemen, we've got a country that we need to manage as well. We've got to have a bold conversation and ask ourselves, do we want to be a country where we collect 70% of our revenues and all it ends up is into paying people's salary? You have no vote for development, you have no vote for doing other jobs that government have to do. I think it's not something that is sustainable. And the president deserves humiliation.
Let me just clear that point. Well, you know what I meant, because you know, when CBAs are agreed upon and signed by both parties, and take note of the meaning of that middle word, bargaining. It's a collective bargaining agreement. And you will always realize that left on their own, those parties bargain in honesty. You find that when the doctors or lecturers sit on the table to negotiate about what their interests are, they'll be very honest. And on the other side, so. And that's why I said, what happens in the course of implementation, you know what a bargain is. There are timelines involved, there are circumstances involved. When this happens, we'll do this and this and that. And of course, sometimes those deadlines may be missed. It can be renegotiated for that matter. The point is that that always is done in many times, in many cases, in honesty. But when a political interest gets into that process, it's very easily exploitable. Because you see, here you're talking about people who are genuinely negotiating because they want better terms, and they deserve it for that matter, be it doctors, be it lecturers. And here on the other hand, you've got the payee and the payer. The payer is saying, yes, we agree and we'll go along with this.
Are you talking about any particular political interest that you can actually say?
So for example, you know, we have seen many cases when our colleagues have exploited the university dons, sometimes even university students, because you know, once you go and stoke that fire, that's about my welfare. You know, I'm bound to react, and if you go here and go here and go here, then you know, teachers, doctors, this is my conviction. If these parties are left to negotiate in good faith upon themselves, they will always find a way.
Senator Halole, it appears you are the problem, according to Senator Omatangi.
I think we collectively, maybe on this panel, need to seize this opportunity and apologize to doctors for suggesting that doctors are so cheap that they can be manipulated by politicians not to go and do that job for which they have been deliberately trained and for which they have taken oath. It is completely unreasonable to impute such a motive against doctors. But more importantly, responding to what Cheriot has said, Cheriot, the revenue collection of this country grows at a rate of 12% per annum.
That's true.
Which means when Uhuru appended his signature as then Deputy Prime Minister in charge of Finance, Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance, that time the revenue collection has grown 4 times 12%. In fact, as we speak now, last year I believe we collected 1026 billion, that is 1.026 trillion, as compared to the 700 billion that we were collecting at that time. Now the workforce has not grown by the same percentage.
That's not accurate.
Can I conclude so that then you tell me off? The workforce the workforce has not grown by the same percentage. Therefore, there is more money available to pay people than there was when Uhuru was appending his signature. The challenge is, what are the priorities? The government has refused to prioritize payment of doctors and nurses. Instead, they have opted to take the money elsewhere with actual figures on mind. If you go to the last budget, the National Assembly allowed 60 billion shillings to sit at Afi House, and Afi House is just in charge of policy. If you could allow that 60 billion to go to the county governments, the governors will have more money to pay our doctors.
So let me say 2 things. Remuneration is a consequence of productivity vis-a-vis workload. The productivity of doctors in this country is probably one of the only noticeable function within the public service. So to quantify, for instance, lump doctors as part of the normal civil service, there is nothing wrong within the Public Service Commission for them to create a special category of doctors. I have relatives who are doctors.
And friends.
And friends. I see they work about 15 to 18 hours a day.
Yes.
Somebody tells you I'm on my way to see you, working in public hospitals. In a half an hour he calls you, says I've been called back, there's a patient that requires attendance. In fact, having them as friends and relatives sometimes is chaos even to your social structure, because they are hardly available when people are supposed to be available. He's rushing to eat prayers because he has to rush to an emergency when all of us are going to eat mbuzi and kuku and bisheti. He's rush to the emergency at the Coast General Hospital. So then secondly is the principle of justiciability of pay. Justiciability of pay means you cannot here as a father be eating chicken and telling some of us, these are harsh economic times, so the rest of us do sukuma. So what is happening here? The industrial action is partly crystallized by justiciability. You are constantly eating we are constantly eating sukuma, and you're eating chicken, and you're telling us they're harsh economic times. So these guys don't buy it. If they saw there was a tightening of belt across the prism of the structure of pay, then there would have been a different issue altogether. And lastly, get your facts right on this doctor strike. It is very, very absurd to impute politics. First and foremost, there are only 3,500 doctors in this country who are employed by public service. Against the World Health Organization, doctor to patient ratio is 1 to 1,000. In Kenya, it was 1 to 17,000. So even the government has a duty and obligation to implement that CBA, because it looks at the overall transformation of the health sector. So I think that's why I'm asking you on this particular one. It is unique. Go and fact find. Because this one is where you will find that there's no politics.
And now we need to take a break, Senator Cheruiyot, and then you need to respond to Bwana Halwale. I'll give you an opportunity once we return. Public first takes a short break. We'll be right back.
I think even I would like to become a teacher.
I have found a perfect match for my son.
What is it, Mom?
Do you really believe that Anandi is ready for marriage? Does Anandi know what a marriage really means?
Don't instigate my daughter, or else you will have to pay for it.
But Dad, I will miss my school very much.
Balikabadu, Monday to Friday on Citizen Television. For generations, the forest was home, a source of plenty for a hunter-gatherer lifestyle. Their culture was modest and pristine.
Hii nguo ndio tulikuwa tunafaa, ndio tunafanyia utamaduni.
But that was before land invaders and the government flushed them out of the Mau. Uprooted and neglected, the Ogiek are struggling to play catch-up.
Tusipopata hii shamba iwe ni yetu, itakuja kupotea.
Their hopes rest on a court ruling ordering for their resettlement.
Kusaidiana ili turudishe ile ardhi ya jamii Ogiek.
Catch the Forest Edge Refugees, only on Citizen Television.